Welcome back to the latest episode of the Freedom Shots podcast. If you're new here, hi, I'm your host, Victoria Snitzer Churchill. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode. This week, my special guest is a great friend of mine, Jessi Blakely. She is a state director on the grassroots side of the Virginia Family Foundation, and she has been doing some very interesting work over the past few weeks to work on Virginia's Senate elections. So, for those of you that are unfamiliar, those of us that work in and around Virginia politics, we say it's always election season in Virginia. By that, we mean that we have elections every year in Virginia. But now we really mean we always have elections in Virginia because what happened in November was that we had two members of the Virginia State Senate elected to Congress. And so these are special elections to fill just this term, that is, of course, starting in Richmond here in a couple weeks. And I'm sure Jessi can dive more into that as well. But then, of course, these people would have to run again in November. So, maybe it's these people, maybe it's the same people. Maybe if, whoever the nominees are, if they lose, they could run again. They could not run again. But yeah, so give us a rundown of what we're looking at. So, we had the two members elected from Virginia, one Republican, one Democrat. The Republican was John McGuire down towards the southwest part of the state. And then, of course, in Northern Virginia, Loudoun County, we have Suhas Subramanyam, who is a Democrat who has vacated his seat to also serve in the Congress. So where does that leave us now, Jessi?
Yeah, so these are our two, like you said, members of the Virginia State Senate who just got elected to Congress in the 5th district and then in the 10th district. And so that leaves two state Senate vacancies. The interesting thing is we also have a state House vacancy that popped up as the result of one of these elections as well. So it really is full steam ahead in Virginia. The elections never stop. I was thinking the other day, and somebody could fact check me on this if they want, but I'm pretty sure this may be the fourth or fifth cycle in a row that we've had a January special election for some reason. And usually that's because since our state house and senate are off-cycle elections, so they happen in odd years, if we have somebody who's an incumbent in one of those bodies run for something else and get elected, we have to fill their seat. So this is kind of where we see these in the past. We've seen these in the past and where we're seeing them now. So up in the 10th Senate District, which is where my organization, Family Foundation Action, has been particularly focused, this is normally a D plus 22, so a seat that favors Democrats by about 22 points. It's up in the eastern part of Loudoun County, but in special elections, we've often seen, Maya Flores in Texas is a great example of this. We've often seen seats that lean Democrat in normal general election conditions be winnable for conservative candidates outside of that general election cycle because special elections are not normally what's on voters' minds. And so often they have a lot lower participation than elections in November. So it's really kind of anybody's game in both of these races. And it's down to, who can turn out their supporters and make them show up at a time where they're not normally thinking about elections here right after the holidays. So up in the 10th Senate District, we've got two candidates. We've got Delegate Srinivasan, who is a Democrat delegate, whose district kind of overlaps part of that state Senate seat. He actually moved into the district and won the Democrat nomination, or moved into the part of his district that overlaps the Senate seat, won the Democrat nomination, and then he is running against the Republican nominee, whose name is Tumai Harding. Tumai is a mom. She's been an advocate. She's spoken in front of the Loudoun County School Board on parental rights issues and things that affected her daughters who were in school. She goes to Cornerstone Church, and so she's just really tied into the community up there. And so they're running against each other. But since the Democrat nominee is currently a member of the House of Delegates who was elected last year, there's also that 26th House of Delegates seat that's kind of nested inside the Senate district that is also having a special election. So we have those two stacked on top of each other, and then we have the 10th, the 10th Senate district down in kind of southwestern central-ish Virginia that John McGuire vacated. So he's in Congress now, and so there's an election there as well, and that favors Republicans. So that's kind of the broad overview of what's going on, what's on the ballot, and all of those elections have nominees for both parties, and that'll be decided on January 7th.
Awesome. So, you mentioned obviously the turnout game that is always the game in elections, any kind of election, but especially in special elections. You kind of talked about how that could potentially favor Republicans up north, but should Republicans be worried actually down in the more conservative part of the state that this could energize Democrats? The Republican that obviously used to be in that congressional seat, Bob Good, he was not favored by Democrats or Republicans. So is there kind of any like animosity that Democrats can feed on to, maybe propel whoever they've got nominated down there in Southwest, South Central Virginia to maybe even steal a seat from Republicans that McGuire held up until his election to Congress?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. It's been some interesting dynamics down there. Obviously, the John McGuire versus Bob Good primary, for those who paid attention, was pretty hotly contested. There's a lot of kind of feelings that resulted from that. I don't know how much those have gone away. But I will say Luther Cyphers, who's the candidate who became the nominee out of the mass meeting for Republicans, did seem to be somebody that a lot of folks got behind. You saw several of the other candidates who ran in that mass meeting for the nomination get behind him right away. So he seems like somebody that's kind of bringing different factions together. It wasn't, McGuire's guy won or Bob Good's guy won. So you kind of see somebody who maybe has an opportunity to overcome the bad blood from the primary and kind of chart his own course here, which is good. But yeah, like I said, this is a turnout game. It's going to be low turnout. One of the great things is that Senate district, at least for Republicans, had a really high turnout for President Trump in November. So there is a lot of energy there to kind of support the direction that the Republican Party is going in. So that could be really positive. Again, it's out of cycle, and the Republican Party's base has sort of shifted to some lower propensity voters who do show up for President Trump and things like that. So they really do have to be able to recapture those voters and make sure that those people are still motivated and still know what's going on and they can show up. So both of these are opportunities for an upset, one way or the other, but they are both in districts that kind of by default lean heavily in one direction. So we'll see. It's going to come down to who can work harder, but we've seen candidates on both sides of the aisle really kind of dialing in, knocking a lot of doors, spending a lot of energy trying to win these races. So it's definitely something to watch.
Definitely, and you mentioned in that district, was that Rockingham County? Was that part of it? That's the county. It was super pro Obama, and then it actually flipped to Trump. And I think it's kind of continued on this Trump wave. I think the local organizer down there, Tanya, she has a big John McGuire backer, and kind of one of the people that was really calling out Bob Good for not serving, his constituents. Somebody that is like a very well respected in Republican circles. Is that energy still there at all?
Well, I think a lot of that energy is still there, especially kind of off of the wave, riding the high of 2024. We've seen a lot of people who have stayed engaged, who are looking for opportunities to get involved, especially ahead of Virginia's gubernatorial election. There's a lot of people too looking at these races to see, in November of this year, we've got all three of our statewides up for election again. So this is kind of the bellwether before the bellwether to see what turnout is like, what enthusiasm is like, the direction that our voters are driving in, what messages are still resonating, and if there's any backlash to Trump, because, Virginia is often a counter-cyclical state. Now, certainly didn't go for President Trump in November, but it did move in his direction pretty substantially between 2020 and 2024 results. So it's something where, we could see if that trend is continuing and if we're still having those voters show up, or if that's going to kind of have a little bit of a negative reaction in the other way because Virginia didn't go for Trump and maybe Democrats are a little bit more enthused now to kind of make that point. So this is going to give us, special elections. I always like to caution people are not the best indicator of where we're going for a general because there's a lot of factors that play in. But as a kind of directional indicator, it will show us if our voters are still kind of motivated on the conservative side of the aisle.
Definitely. And now, are either of these seats, either in the House of Delegates or the Senate, are any of these potential majority makers? What does that mean for Youngkin governing? Winsome Sears obviously kind of being probably kind of the de facto nominee for governor, at least at this point. With her obviously having had some tie-breaking votes in the Senate, does this give her a chance to make a difference as the legislature kicks off in the next couple of weeks? And then again, kind of what does this mean potentially for Youngkin's legacy, really? Because as you mentioned, Virginia is the off cycle. For the gubernatorial, I believe it's us in New Jersey that have elections this year. So, a lot of eyes are on Virginia, both in terms of politics, but also in terms of policy.
Yeah, so these races are all incredibly significant. Virginia's state house and state senate are currently controlled by Democrats, but the majority is very slim. It's one seat in both chambers. So if Republicans have a surprise pickup, either in the House seat in Senate District 32 or sorry, in Senate District 32 or in House District 26, which are the two open seats that Democrats currently control. Republicans are able to flip either of those, we have a tie in one of our chambers. If they're able to flip both, we have a tie in both chambers. So, particularly in the Senate, that is very important right now. That means that for all tie votes in the Senate, Winsome Sears gets to cast the tiebreaker, which is not only huge for Governor Youngkin's legacy, it's huge to set Sears up for her run for governor, because that really gives her the opportunity to go on record for some of these things where normally she's not able to vote on these issues. So that would make a huge difference for Republicans going into this next election. The other thing that's at stake here is constitutional amendments. So for my organization, we're a pro-life, pro-family organization. And what we've seen is Democrats' top priority, while they have control of both chambers, is to push through a very radical abortion amendment that would allow abortion up to the moment of birth. It would allow basically no legislation would be constitutional that would create any sort of safety standards, any sort of requirements for parental consent for minors. There's a whole host of other things that we're concerned about this amendment, just truly one of the most radical in the country. But the way that amendments work through our General Assembly, they have to pass both chambers twice. If they are a tie vote, they fail automatically. They have to be that over 50%. So if we have a tied state Senate or state House, those amendments don't go forward. These are also things that the governor doesn't have veto power over. So really it is just down to who controls the General Assembly. So for a litany of reasons, these elections are kind of make or break for Governor Youngkin's ability to pass conservative legislation between now and November, or now in January. And also for some potential setup for Sears for her campaign. So we've seen the governor invest a lot in these races. We've seen all three of the Republican statewides be very vocal here, as well as incumbents in the party in the state Senate and state House advocating for the nominees in these races.
Absolutely. I mean, just the attention that we get on some of our races in Virginia, particularly Northern Virginia. I know these House seats and Senate seats are typically expensive. Some of them surpass $1 million plus, and that's not even including outside spending most times. So, kind of as an observer, it is always fascinating to keep tabs on. But do you think there is a lot of attention on these seats nationally? I mean, at least to me, I feel like these are kind of slipping a little bit under the radar because there is so much attention on Trump, on Congress, on, the speaker vote that we're having today as we're recording this. Are national groups, whether that's, pro-life groups or pro-abortion groups or any of these kind of major players in elections like this, are they paying attention, or are they, are you guys kind of in the minority with Family Foundation? Are you guys paying attention more than other groups are?
Well, I will say as in terms of outside groups that are getting involved, there is a ton of emphasis in Virginia from Virginia organizations, from faith-based groups, from kind of right of center groups that really understand how critical these races could be for policy over the next year and for setting up the legacy in the future. But outside groups has been fairly limited. One of the things that we focus on heavily is bringing in some of our coalition groups, and we've been able to do that to kind of assist in this race with some airdrop support. And so we are super thankful for our partners who have been invested in this with us. But in terms of coverage, we haven't really seen that. We've seen that, mostly the people who are paying attention to this are people who are in Virginia. I brought up the life issue earlier. National abortion amendments that have been passing in different states, or, thankfully this year we saw a couple of them fail. But that is something that's been gaining national attention. And to that extent, I don't think people really realize that the process in Virginia has already started. So our organization is already, looking at tracking that legislation, trying to find opportunities to kind of get ahead of that and put up a defense for life where we can. And so we see this as one of those opportunities, sort of the next opportunity. But it is sort of under the radar how much of an impact these races can have, not just on that issue, but on a ton of other things that are coming down the pipe.
Absolutely. And, you and I both met through Young Republicans. It's been a very fun time to be a conservative, be a Republican in Virginia the past few years. Obviously, the Youngkin flip in 2021 was the start of that. And I think it's been kind of portrayed as a start of a lot of things, which honestly, at least in my view, they didn't necessarily materialize. So how much political capital do you think Republicans actually have in the state? I feel like since that Youngkin election, we've had two very close congressional races in 2022. We've had, a state majority that was decided by just a few thousand votes across key seats in 2023. And, last year in 2024, I covered Virginia as one of my states for the New York Post. I was pretty optimistic of how that election would play out in Virginia. And, as somebody that is also an analyst, I looked at some factors like turnout and low propensity voters and things like that that really seemed to trend in the right direction. But I would say the result that we saw on election day was, I don't want to say unanticipated, but I feel like we could have done a little bit better. So how do we move on? Because it did seem like Youngkin, through his organization with Spirit of Virginia, kind of has spurred a lot and invested a lot in, uh, you know, down ballot races, whether that's congressional and again, state legislative, like we've talked about. But why have we not been able to pin the tail on the donkey, hit the nail on the head? Why do we keep missing on the right?
Yeah, so I will say, when Youngkin won in 2021, there's a couple of things that happened there. There was a lot of energy to say, okay, is Virginia going to turn into Florida, and how soon, right? And I hope that that's the case one day, but we're not there yet. And so one of the things to keep in mind is just truly how rough of a shape the right was in Virginia prior to Youngkin. And so, good example, good model of this is Rick Scott in Florida. Actually, when he became governor, Florida had been a blue state for a very long time. We had a Republican governor take over and really start the takeover. And that takeover didn't end until DeSantis was able to nominate the final conservative Supreme Court justice in Florida. So it took a very long time for that transition to happen. And so one of the things I think we often want to see, one cycle changes on the right where we start winning and then we always win. And I'm sure the left likes to see that too. But realistically, this takes time to build our coalition and it takes time to continue to make inroads into communities where we've lost ground. And one of the things that happened in between there, we won the legislature when Youngkin won, or the state house when Youngkin won in 2021, and we lost the majority narrowly in 2023. We only lost it by about 3,500 votes across a couple districts, right? So it's really a very narrow margin. And a lot of that is down to the fact that the House of Delegates and state Senate lines were redrawn between the 2021 and 2023 elections. So what we have to look at is kind of the overall trend. And I think the overall trend should give us some hope here. Federally, Virginia is still not red. And we still have some work to do there. But at the state level, we are a very purple, very hotly contested state. And that's something that we've seen maintain. And even on the congressional level, we've seen that trend where we did pick up the Kiggins seat in 2022. We weren't able to pick up the 7th district in this past year in 2024, but we did have the margin that Spanberger won it by previously. So these are all incremental gains, and they might not make us feel great overnight, but it does show that directionally, I think the right is going in the right direction. And you can look at, the governor's approval ratings right now. Youngkin's got almost a 60% approval rating at one of the last polls that came out. I think it's hovering around 56, 57%. So he's still a very popular governor, and that makes a big difference. It may mean that some of these races we haven't pulled off yet, but directionally, we're still, our heads are above water. We're going in the right direction. And so if we can continue that momentum and that energy to say, like, this is the long game that we're playing and we're winning these communities back, I think there's a big opportunity there. And I think that the 2024 results speak to that.
Definitely. And kind of on that note, what do you think is Youngkin's legacy right now, and where do you think he can go from here? There's been rumors that he would seek higher offices, additional opportunities. Really, I think since the day that he was elected in that manner, which he was, turning a historically blue state, being the first Republican elected in 20 years. Um, there was rumors that he was going to run for president. There was rumors that he was going to end up being in Trump's cabinet. Neither of those have happened, which I personally am very happy about because I had op-eds written that saying, he should stay in Virginia, he should work on Virginia. And, thankfully those never had to see the light of day. But, I was ready to kind of put my foot down as a conservative, as somebody that voted for Youngkin, saying that he should put us as Virginians first. But, now he is in his last full year, since we will have a new governor by the end of 2025, or I guess a new governor elected by the end of 2025 in Virginia. So, do you think he runs for Senate? Do you think he may end up in the administration when, a cabinet secretary, maybe somebody doesn't get confirmed, or maybe they serve for a couple of years and then there's kind of an opening. But, do you think the sky's the limit for him? Do you think there's something he would want to do versus not want to do?
Yeah, so I mean, I can't speak for the governor, but I certainly think that he is somebody who's gained a lot of national attention. There's a lot of people who really like, his style and what he has to offer. And I was a delegate to the RNC over the summer, and the amount of attention that Virginia received because of Youngkin from other states, that Virginia hosted an event one of the nights, and it was one of the most packed events at the RNC. So there's certainly a lot of national appetite, I think, for him to continue to be an active voice in politics. I am pretty happy as a Virginian that he was able to, that he made the decision to stay here and finish out his term, and that he was so clear about that as a priority. I think, even though that might delay whatever his next step is, I think it cements his legacy as somebody who is really solid and who's willing to see the job through, not just somebody who's kind of ambitious and looking for the next step. So I'm glad that he's planning to serve his full term, and there's no reason why he won't be able to do that. Hopefully, we will be inaugurating a Republican governor, another Republican governor in January of 2026. And then from there, who knows? We will have U.S. Senate elections coming up. That's certainly a possibility. We've also seen other governors in the past kind of take the policy agenda that they were able to put into place. We saw, Youngkin's really the education governor. We've seen him take a lot of steps on parental rights and reforming Virginia's education policy, Virginia's school systems, the way that parents are engaged in that way. And so, that's a national message that he could take and go do stuff with in other places. There's a lot of governors who have formed PACs or organizations to go promote those policy agendas and kind of expand the reach of those things to keep their national brand relevant, maybe for a future, presidential or VP run. So, I think he really has a lot of runway to his political future, but I wouldn't want to say definitively where he's going to wind up because I don't know, but I hope he sticks around. So we'll leave it there.
Sure, definitely. Well, kind of one of my mottos in creating this platform of Freedom Shots is seeking truth and advancing freedom. So, how would you say your work kind of aligns with that mission, the work that both you do individually and kind of in your full-time job at Family Foundation Action?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. So I love the job that I have. I work for Family Foundation Action, our C4 here. And so one of the things that we do is to engage voters of faith, Christian voters in Virginia, a lot of evangelical, Catholic, and other denominations, but those are kind of our primary groups. And we advocate for mostly family policy issues. So a lot of that has to do with school choice, parental rights, religious liberty, defending the unborn. And so, this is a really cool issue set because it really has to do with protecting those who need protection, with promoting the foundational institutions that make our nation, make any nation strong, which is the family. And so, one of the things Victoria and I have had fun talking about in the past is just what we can do to promote young family growth in Virginia. And that's something that I really love that our organization does. And so any of the candidates that my work supports, any of the recommendations on candidates that we make with our report cards, with General Assembly scorecards, things like that. All of that has to do with people who, not based on party designation, but based on the legislation that they're carrying, and the issues that they care about, their record. These are people who are have first and foremost in their mind, protecting the protection of life of the innocent and of strengthening families here in the Commonwealth. And I think both of those things set us up really well for the future. And so something I really love to be a part of, and a great team that we have here. So we're excited, not just for this special election. This is just the warm-up round, but all 100 House of Delegates seats are up for election in November. So we determine the balance of a chamber again in November, along with our statewide. So that's a huge opportunity that we're looking forward to this year.
Definitely. Well, is there anything I didn't ask you before we wrap up here?
Listen, I think we've covered a lot of things, but I just want to encourage folks, if you're in that eastern part of Loudoun County, or if you're in the 10th Senate District down in Central Virginia, please make sure that you go out and vote on January 7th. You've got some really exciting races going on there. It's very important. I know it's going to be cold, but it's potentially one of the most important elections that we're going to have this year. We always say that. We always say, this is the most important election. But truly, there's probably going to be projected in the 32nd Senate District around 20,000 voters total. So it's not very many. And most of these elections do come down in Virginia to a couple hundred or less votes. So the balance of our General Assembly going forward, this state Senate seat, when both of these state Senate seats are elected, those people are going to serve for the next 3 years. So it is the only chance that people on the right have to change the balance of the state Senate between now and 2027. So it's a big deal. And we want to make sure that as many people get out and get motivated to be involved in this as possible. So always feel free to reach out if you need anything.
Yeah, definitely. And where can people keep tabs on what you're doing and what Family Foundation is doing, both now and in the coming months and weeks and years and days and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, the best place to keep tabs on me is on X, where I have a lot of fun and sometimes post some spicy tweets, but that's usually where I post all my
And host
updates.
spaces, host fun
Yeah,
conversations.
host fun spaces. It's a good time. So you can follow me at just Jessi, JESSIGOP, or you can follow Family Foundation Action at TFF Action VA on X as well. And we host a lot of spaces there with some folks who are engaged in politics, political commentary, tracking these things, analysis in Virginia. So it's a really good time. So check us out there or online at familyfoundation.org.
Definitely. Well, thank you again so much, and thank you for all the amazing work that you do. I love that you mentioned the idea of having, as Youngkin says, Virginia be the best place to work, live, and raise a family. Maybe we can
Absolutely.
do a follow-up episode on that as you get to some fun and exciting policy work here in the new year and in the new legislative session. Just days and weeks away. But thank you
Yeah, a
again
couple
so much
days.
for
The
joining.
special elections are on January 7th and session starts on the 8th. So it's a busy
But
week.
you're really bored. You have a lot of free time. Like you have so much time on your hands. Yeah.
But it'll be really exciting to watch both. So definitely everybody should stay tuned in. Thanks so much for having me, Victoria.
Definitely. Thank you so much. We'll chat soon.
All
Bye.
right, bye.
And thank you everybody for tuning into this week's episode. And we will chat with everybody again soon. Bye now.